Welcome back everyone to part 3 of the Social Clone project. Now we're going to continue with the accounts application, and what we're going to do now is focus on setting up our template HTML files for the login page, the sign up page, as well as connecting that to our actual index page with a navigation bar. Let's get started and hop over to the Atom text editor. Alright, here I am at the Atom text editor. Now before we get started, what we're going to be doing is installing a library called Bootstrap 3 for Django, or Django-Bootstrap 3. And what this library does is it formats forms in a really nice way using Bootstrap. So go ahead and in your virtual environment, or even in your default if you're not using a virtual environment, say pip install Django-Bootstrap 3. Whoops. And then hit enter and let that install. Now I actually already have it, so it just said all packages meet the requirements, already satisfied. But for you, inside your virtual environment, again, say pip install Django-Bootstrap 3. So that's something we're going to be using throughout the project to actually just make the forms look a little nicer. Now once you've done that, I'm going to go ahead and just clear that. Come over to your settings.py file, and in your settings.py file, scroll all the way down to where it says installed apps. And here what we're going to say is Bootstrap 3, and then comma. So again, pip install Bootstrap 3, and then add it to your installed applications. And we'll show you in a little bit how to use it. It's essentially just 2 lines of code. You load it in, and then when you call form, say Bootstrap form right before it, and it will actually make it look a lot nicer in your application. Okay, let's come back to our accounts templates in login.html and signup.html. We're going to start off with the signup.html, and it's actually going to look really similar to the login.html. So in the signup page, what I'm going to do is say extends, and I'm going to extend from base.html, which we're going to work with at the very end of this. And then the other thing I'm going to do is load Bootstrap 3, which is the library I just installed. So extend from base.html that we created earlier, and then load Bootstrap 3. And then what we're going to do is call block content, so that content block, and then I'm going to create a div of the container class. Inside of this, I'll have a heading 1 saying sign up, and then I will call a form. So inside of this form, I'm just going to, I won't have it have a class or even an action because the action is going to be taken care of by Django, and the method should be post. And I always like capitalizing it. It works the same if it's not capitalized, but that's just for readability for me. And inside of this, we always need our token. So you can start typing in CSRF underscore token inside a token call like that. And then the last thing we're going to do is create a form. And once you have Bootstrap 3 installed, what you're going to say is bootstrap underscore form space form. And that's going to allow us to actually make this form look a lot nicer using Bootstrap on our web page. And that's how you use Bootstrap 3. You can check out the documentation links for it, but essentially that's the way we're going to be using it for our project. And then after that, inside this form, we're going to have an input button. It's going to be type submit. I'll give it a value of sign up. So that's what it says in the actual button. And then it won't have a name, but we will give it a class. Let's give it a class btn-default and save that. Okay, then I'm going to select all of this with Control A and then copy it and bring over my login.html file, and I'm going to copy and paste this because essentially we're going to be doing something really similar here. So I am again going to extend from the base.html, Bootstrap 3, block content, container, but instead of sign up, this is now going to say login, and then save that, and then the value over here is going to be login. And then I'm going to save that. Okay, perfect. Now let's go ahead and set up our views.py file and our urls.py file and the connection between them. So coming over to views.py, again, this is all under accounts. You should already have this from the previous lecture, just this sign up create view. Then go over to urls.py, which if we haven't created yet, what we need to do is create it. So underneath accounts, say new file, urls.py. So inside this new file, urls.py, hit enter. And now here, we're going to import a couple things. I'm going to say from Django.configuration.urls import URL, and then I will say from Django.contrib.url auth authorization, import views as auth_views. Now, the reason we're doing this is make sure you have Django 1.11 at least to do this, but Django 1.11 introduced a login view and a logout view, so we actually don't have to take care of those in our views.py file anymore. Previously, what we had to do is inside of views.py, create a login view and a logout view. Now, Django 1.11 has taken care of that for us, and that's located under the contrib.auth views. So I'm going to say import views as authorization views or auth_views, so I don't mix it up with my original views, which is here. So I'm saying now from .import views. So this is going to, line number 3 is going to import my own views.py file, and so I don't mix the authorization views, I'm going to import as authorization views. And now let's set up our app name. So I will call this app name accounts. That way, in case I ever want to use URL templates in my base.html file, for example at the navigation bar, I can just refer to it as the accounts application. And then we'll set up our URL patterns list. So inside of the list, I will say URL, and then using regular expression, I'm going to say login. And now this is where we're going to use that new Django 1.11 feature. I will say auth_views dot, and then the login view is the actual view, and I will say as view, and that's the new login view feature of Django 1.11. And then inside of that, I'm actually going to connect it to the template name. So inside of login view as view, I can say template name is equal to, and whoops, let me undo that. That's going to be a string, and I'll zoom out just a little bit and collapse this so we can see the whole thing. It's going to be accounts/login.html, and I'm going to give it the name equal to login. That's going to be for URL templates in the future. And if you want, you can separate this out into more than one line. Here I'm just writing it in one giant line, but you could just break this up into multiple lines as so. All right, so again, this is our login URL. We connect it to login. We call login view from this authorization views as view, and then pass in the template we want to connect it to, in this case login.html, and give it the name login for future URL templates. Then a comma here for our next URL, and that's going to be pretty similar, except it's going to be logout. So I will say regular expression, logout, $, and then I want authorization views, and now I'm going to ask for the logout view as a view, and set the name equal to logout. Then finally, I will have the signup view. So that'll be URL, signup view, right there. And then from my views file, I'll say views.the signup view I created as a view, and then I will say name is equal to, I'll just call this signup. Okay, and now our urls.py file inside of our accounts application is ready. And just to quickly review what we just did here, we're already familiar with importing URLs. Again, I'm importing contrib.auth.views as authorization views so I don't mix it up with my own views.py file, and that's going to allow me to use these new features of Django 1.11, login view and logout view. As a quick note, for login view, you had to connect it to your template name. For logout view, it has a default view that we can use, so that's what we're going to do. We'll say logout view as view and name logout, and that will essentially go back to the home page once you logged out. And then our signup, we already have that connected, so we'll say signup as view, name signup. And that's all we have to do for our urls.py file. Okay, now the next step is to actually connect our accounts application to our full project using views and URLs. So let's open up our tree and come back to simplesocial.py, and then we're going to connect it via URLs. So right now I'm in the main project urls.py file, and let's fill this in so it actually connects to the login pages for the accounts. What we're going to do is over here, I will say URL, so create a new URL, and using regular expressions, what we're going to do is say accounts /, and then we will say include, and I'm going to include accounts URLs, so that URLs file we just made, and then give it the namespace. Oops, and this actually should go inside include. I will give it the namespace, and let's just say accounts here, comma, and then save that. And then the other thing I'm going to do is say our accounts slash, and I'm going to include Django dash contrib dash or dot auth dot urls. Okay, and then comma, and we're going to leave that as is. And that should be it for the actual URLs file for connecting to the accounts. So essentially what this is doing is it's connecting the accounts main space to accounts.urls. That way if someone has login or sign up, that connects directly to the urls.py file that we just created in the accounts application. Now this django.contrib.auth.urls, that's going to allow us to connect everything that Django has under the hood for authorization. So you'll notice that if we hit over on admin.py under accounts, we actually don't really need to register any models here because we're using Django's built-in users model. So we don't really need to register anything with the admin. Remember with users, that was already included whenever you log into your admin page. So we're just using what Django has already nicely provided for us. Now let's jump over to our base.html file. So base.html all the way under our main templates. And essentially what I'm going to be doing is copying and pasting from the notes themselves and explaining each copy and paste. So the first thing I want to do is let's just give this the title of star social. Save that. And then underneath, or inside of this head, I should say, and underneath that title, I'm going to be copying and pasting some links. So the first one I'm going to copy and paste is just Bootstrap itself. So let's put that in. So there's the giant link for the style sheet to Bootstrap. The next one I'm going to do is the optional theme that goes with Bootstrap. So I'm going to copy and paste that as well. You can copy and paste this either from the Bootstrap site or from the notes themselves. I'd recommend the notes just so we make sure we're all using the same version or on the same page. And then finally, I'm going to copy and paste the JavaScript line. That's again also from the Bootstrap. Okay, so those are my 3 Bootstrap links. The other thing I'm going to do is copy and paste a link to a style. So the style sheet that I'm going to be linking to is our own style sheet, but also Google Fonts API. So we're going to be using this font from the Google APIs. So as we've seen before, I'm just going to link that up in the head, and I'm going to link the master CSS file. So let's do that as well. Underneath this, I'm going to link to the master CSS. Now, what's important to note is how I'm actually linking this. You remember that we created a CSS folder underneath our templates folder, and then underneath that, I created a master CSS file, and I'm going to link it using this static call. So wherever we say that load static, I'm going to be able to connect this. So we just say style sheet href, and this is probably the most important line here as far as getting everything connected. We'll say static, which means go look in the static directory that we set up in the settings.py file, and then go to simple social, CSS, and then master CSS to actually link everything. Okay, now underneath the body, outside of the block, I want my actual navigation bar. So let's actually build this together. I will say nav, and there's my nav, and in my nav I will say class, and I will give this a nav bar, my nav, and then we can actually just give it the default role. So we'll say this is role navigation. I'm basically just this is copy and pasted from the documentation, but I want to walk through it just in case you end up copy and pasting and are wondering what's going on here. So I gave it this class navbar my nav. My nav is something I'm going to be using later on, so that's my own special navigation in case you ever want to add your own CSS styling. What you can do is just kind of tack on classes. And then the next thing I'm going to do is set up a div here, and I will call this container from Bootstrap that we've seen before, and that goes inside navbar. And now it's time to add in an anchor, and the actual link is going to be to our home page. So we're going to do this with a URL template tagging, and we will say URL and give it the name home. And that will link to the home link, and then we're also going to say here, let's just say this will be star social, and let's make this into an actual brand, which means I'm going to say the class of this anchor tag is navbar-brand, and I will tack on my nav class in case I ever want to edit the CSS for that. So again, right now, my name navigation, it's all in a container, and I set my brand Remember, that's that large home button that goes all the way to the left. And now I'm going to start an unordered list. And inside this unordered list, I will say class is equal to navbar dash navbar dash right. So kind of right align everything. And these are going to be just a couple of buttons, things that go to a post, a group, a create group, and a logout page, and then a login page and a sign up page. Now some of these we won't be able to fill in out right away because we haven't actually created them. So we're going to kind of leave certain links blank and then we'll fill them in later. Okay, first thing I want to do is I want to check if the user is authenticated. So a user object is going to be returned to this web page, so I can actually check using some template tags if the user dot, and I can call the is authenticated attribute off of this, which means so the user's authenticated, they logged in, it's been successful, and we're going to basically see what the actual navigation bar will look like. So I put in list objects in this unordered list, created an anchor tag here, and right now I will leave that blank as an href, but what it's actually going to say inside this anchor tag is just going to be post. So that means if the user's logged in, they can then have a little button in their navigation bar that allows them to post something. The next thing I'm going to do is, again, list anchor tag, and this will be groups. So if the user's logged in, they'll be able to see the groups. Again, I'm going to leave that blank. We haven't actually created any groups yet. And then, again, if they're logged in, I'm going to allow them to create a group. So we'll have a create group option over there. And then finally, I'm going to have a log out. So if the user's authenticated, that means they're logged in. So we should probably have a log out button here. So we'll say log out. And this one I can fill in because I do have this href ready to go. So we're going to say for the URL template, href is going to be equal to, in a string, accounts colon log out. And that connects to that urls.py, which connects to that logout view. And now I'm ready to do the other options in case my user is not authenticated, meaning they haven't logged in yet. So else, meaning they haven't logged in, I will do the following. I'll create a groups tag. So we should still be able to see the groups. Whoops, let me do an href colon here and just type in groups under the anchor. So we should still be able to see the groups even if you're not logged in. That way you can just kind of visit as an or not logged in user. And then the other option was just going to be to either log in or to sign up. And these I actually do have the URL links ready to go. We just created them. So let's create those here. So I will say URL accounts login for this guy. And then in the href here for the sign up, I will say URL accounts sign up. Save. And then as always, if I have an if statement with template tagging, I need to say end if. So end if. Okay. So we're going to be filling this a lot more once we have posts and groups created. But right now we're just using the basics. I have accounts log out, log in, and sign up. And that ends my unordered list. So that should end my navigation bar. And then I have my content. And I actually am going to wrap this content in a class container. So we'll say container, and then I'm also going to put in my content, which can be a class I later edit in my CSS file, that master CSS. And let's put the content inside of this. Okay. So going all the way down to the bottom, we're going to eventually link to our JavaScript. Right now we don't have a JavaScript file that we've been messing around with, but we'll take care of that later. So let's just save that. So by now we should have a simple navigation bar. A lot of the links are just empty, but we should at least be able to see the empty buttons themselves. So we'll see something that says post, groups, create groups, and this will allow us to kind of check if the user authentication is working. So that's our base.html file, and we should already have the index.html file ready to go since we've done that earlier. Okay, our template files should be ready to go. We still have to do a couple of things such as make the migrations and make sure the accounts are fully set up. We're going to do that in the very next lecture, so I will see you right then, and we'll continue off right where we left off here.